It's so easy to dismiss the idea of signs as superstitious nonsense, and quite often a lot of what people would consider signs is superstitious nonsense. However, if one is to take a scientific approach and look at these things to see what sort of patterns and reoccurring factors occur, and when one looks at these patterns, one gets to see a lot of symbology coming together to point to various things. Signs stand out from the background. With numbers, a double number stands out, or a triple number, for example, or even a quadruple number such as 4444. Studying signs, I've done it without looking at any traditions, but just to see what stood out. To see what stood out and what it seemed to point to, and just to see what would happen. And so what we end up with is a bunch of coincidences which tend to point at the same thing. And it is these things which stand out, and intelligence, as it were, seeks to work out patterns. It sees patterns and comes up with some predictability about patterns, and such is all the knowledge that man has accumulated. And likewise here, with these signs, patterns are standing out. How these are interpreted is open to debate, I guess, but a sign is only useful when it points to something which in the end makes sense. So we end up with signs and secondary signs. The signs themselves point to a prophecy. The secondary signs point to the signs which point to the prophecy. And so you have these coincidences which come together like the lining up of the wheels in a jackpot poker machine to bring forth a jackpot, to align them up. We can compare it if one was to triangulate. Say, for example, the old saying that all roads lead to Rome. We can see that if we go out of Rome, say 20 miles, and draw a big circle around the main city of Rome, and then we can come in from anywhere in that outer limit on any of the roads, and it will say Rome 20 miles. And the point here is, if we join the lines to this, once again we have the equivalent of crosshairs, but many of them, and all intersecting the same point. And so a sign at Rome itself would say Rome. This is Rome. And so you would see that particular sign describing the place, or naming the place, Rome. And then you have the secondary signs, which are signs outside of Rome, which point towards Rome. And the same thing we have here is with prophecy. And another pointer here on prophecy is in the Jewish law of the Old Testament, it said that all things would be confirmed with 2 and 3 witnesses. Now some say 2 and 3, some say 2 or 3. Now the point here is that there will be several secondary signs pointing to a sign which will also be pointing to a fulfilled prophecy. And so these are things to consider. The first mention of a prophecy and its verse number, and that number coming up at some other time. Then we have things where one prophecy links to another prophecy in a strange sort of way as a coincidence. For example, Daniel chapter 7 verse 8, 7:8 that is the little horn coming up from the roots of the 3 horns of the 10. Now we also have Revelations chapter 13 verse 18, where it actually has a calculation of the number of the beast prophecy. And it just so happens that in conjunction to names and places and what have you adding up to 666, on the 78th day of the year he came to power, this leader turned 666 lunar months, which are 30-day months. He turned 666 lunar months old on the 78th day of the year he came to power. His name adds up to 666, his office number adds up to 666, his country adds up to 666, his continent adds up to 666, his weapons add up to 666, his date of birth adds up to 666, The year he became a Christian adds up to 666. The year he came to office adds up to 666. And in fact, the date that he came to office is also the same numbers as the prophecy of Daniel 11:21. And Daniel 11:21 is when the final king / Antichrist / the beast comes to power. And if we actually look at 11:21 and we swap that around as 21:11, we get 9:11 p.m. in the military clock, the 24-hour clock. So 9:11 p.m. We look at other things like September 11, 7.8 months exactly to the day of the beast coming to power. Revelations 9:11 is the destroyer in the fifth trumpet. The fifth trumpet is the next trumpet in line after the fourth, and which we have shown to be the Gulf War in 1991, January 1991. Now if you write that as 91-1, we have another 911. So we have these secondary signs which make things stand out, and that's the purpose of the sign. The purpose of the sign is to stand out from the background and more or less say, look at me. But not to look at me for the sake of looking at me, but to look at me and see what I'm pointing to. And that's what the sign does. It points to, it could be an arrow, it could be a crosshair. And with days, numbers, counts of numbers, meanings of names, names of places, people, names of events, names of operations in the military, all of these things coming to bring about many coincidences as secondary signs which point to the primary signs, which point to the prophecy which is seen fulfilled in the world events as shown on the news and is picked up by some in documentaries. And the major events stand out, such as Abu Ghraib with the torments and tortures, and the debate whether it was torment or whether it was torture. Well, this is translated two different ways, as torment and as torture. The number of days between September 11 and the start of the war on Iraq, called Operation Iraqi Freedom, which was the start of the war in 2003, March 19 in Washington, March 20 in Iraq, 8 hours ahead in the international dateline. And we find 555 days as a sign pointing to the fifth trumpet. It is 4,445 days after the start of the air war of the first Gulf War, which was January 91. Did you hear that? 4445. And what you'll find is a triple repeat often shows up. The fact that it's 4445 is sort of like saying, well, yes, this is the fourth trumpet and we're pointing to the fifth trumpet. When you look at the first trumpet and the fifth trumpet, 1914 with the First World War, 2003 with the war in Iraq, we find that if we count the numbers of years between them and have each of those as two big lines on the ruler, as it were, and count all the millimetres between them, as it were, there is exactly 88. 88 shows up as the signs for these things. 88 is the number of days it takes for Mercury to orbit the Sun. In mythology it's called the messenger of the gods. It was present at the birth of Jesus Christ. The birth of Jesus Christ, or two names that is used by Jesus in the Bible. The Greek, the New Testament was written in Greek, and so the mention of the word Jesus in Greek was actually spelled I-E-S-O-U-S, Isus, translated from the Greek into the English. In the English gematria, where A equals 1 and Z equals 26, it adds up to 88. There is a prophecy in Isaiah 7:14 where it talks about the birth to a virgin, and his name shall be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. The angel quotes that to Mary at the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew as a fulfillment. And then when we look at Revelations 12:1, we see that there's a sign in the heavens of a woman, a maiden, giving birth. And we find that that's the constellation Virgo. And so we see these pointers as we put all of the pieces on the table and we put them together and we get the evidence that is required in order to build the case. Secondary signs point to primary signs, which point to prophecy being fulfilled in world events.